What would you do if I told you that a Hafiz-e-Quran girl was forced into a marriage with a cow? A tale so bizarre, so heart-wrenching, that it will leave you questioning the depths of human cruelty and deception. This isn't just any story. It's a gripping account of betrayal, desperation, and an unimaginable twist of fate. In a kingdom ruled by a desperate king longing for an heir, a cunning fakir disguised as a saint spins a web of lies. Promises are made, lives are manipulated, and a family's fate is sealed. In the center of this storm is Noor Bano, an innocent girl whose life takes a horrifying turn when she unknowingly becomes a pawn in a sinister plot. Married under the guise of tradition and honor, Noor Bano has no idea what secrets lurk behind the veil of her wedding. Why did the king agree to such an outrageous condition? What secrets does Noor Bano's mysterious groom hide? And how did a mother's betrayal and a grandfather's deceit turn this young girl's world upside down? The answers will shock you, but the truth will haunt you. Stay tuned for a story that will leave you speechless until the very last word. Friends, today's story is about a young girl who was a Hafiz-e-Quran, one who has memorized the Quran, and whose marriage was arranged with a cow. But what could have been the compulsion that forced such an innocent girl into such an unusual marriage? Be sure to follow this story till the end to uncover the extremes to which people can go in their cruelty. So, friends, the story goes back to ancient times when a king ruled over a village. This king was very virtuous and treated the villagers with great kindness. The villagers respected the king deeply. However, the king carried a sorrow in his heart. He had no children to carry on his legacy. To have children, the king performed numerous good deeds. But none of these acts bore fruit for the king, as he remained childless despite all his efforts. Desperate, the king decided to marry a second time, hoping that this would bring him the joy of fatherhood. Yet, even after his second marriage, the king was not blessed with a child. This left the king deeply distressed. Among his advisors was a minister who would assist him with all the village affairs and always offer him valuable advice. The minister suggested, "You should marry a third time, and this time you will surely be blessed with a child." The king agreed and married for the third time. This time he chose a young bride, but this too yielded no results. 2 years passed since the king's third marriage, and then, one day, a wandering fakir, a holy man, came to see him. The king offered his help to the fakir and said, "Pray for me, so I may have a child. The moment Allah grants me an heir, I will reward you greatly." The fakir was pleased and responded, "May Allah grant your wish, but there is something I must tell you." Hearing this, the king grew anxious, wondering what the fakir was about to reveal. The fakir said, "You will have a son after 5 years. He will be extraordinarily handsome, and people will envy him. However, because of this envy, if anyone other than his mother looks at him, he will fall ill. You must keep him hidden from the world until he turns 18. Otherwise, he may leave this world forever." The king became deeply worried at the thought of waiting 5 years and the precautions he would need to take. Time passed, and the king's 3 wives eventually passed away. Overwhelmed with worry, the king decided to marry a 4th time. 5 years later, Allah blessed the king with good news. His new wife was expecting a child. Overjoyed, the king distributed sweets across the village and summoned the fakir once again. To show his gratitude, the king even had a palace built for the fakir and said, "From now on, you will live here." The fakir was delighted. However, no one knew that the king's 4th wife was none other than Shanu, the daughter of the same fakir, who was actually a fortune-teller in disguise. This secret was known only to the fakir. Shanu used to visit her father regularly at the palace and was overjoyed at the news of her pregnancy. However, when Shanu discovered that she was expecting a daughter instead of a son, she panicked. She rushed to her father and said, "Do something. If the king finds out I am having a daughter instead of a son, he will divorce me, and all my luxuries will come to an end." The fakir, who was not a fakir but a cunning astrologer, lived in another village. It was part of his plan to marry off his daughter to the king. Through magic, he had caused the deaths of the king's previous 3 wives, disguised himself as a fakir, and convinced the king to marry his daughter under the pretense of prophecy. Now, as soon as Shanu revealed her predicament, her father assured her, "Don't worry, I have deceived the king with my words before, and I will do so again. The king will believe whatever I tell him." Shanu was relieved and trusted her father completely. Once again, her father, disguised as a fakir, went to the king and delivered a grim message. "I have calculated something, but the news is very troubling." The king responded, "I do not care about any bad news as long as I have an heir. This happiness outweighs any sorrow." Hearing this, the fakir, still posing as an astrologer, said, "Your child is indeed on its way into this world, but before their marriage you must never lay eyes on your son. The spiritual efforts you have undertaken to attain this child come with this condition. It is said that when a child is born due to the blessings of a saint or a fakir, they must be kept away from human eyes to protect them from the evil eye." The fakir advised the king, "I strongly suggest that no one, except the child's mother, should ever see your child." Upon hearing this, the king was enraged and said, "You wretch! How dare you say this? I have waited 10 long years for my son, and now that he is finally coming into this world, you tell me I cannot even look at him? How is that even possible?" The astrologer, still disguised as a fakir, replied calmly, "My job is to inform you of what lies ahead. Now it is up to you whether you choose to take this risk or follow my advice to protect your son." The king, after hearing these words, reluctantly agreed, and Shanu felt a great burden lifted from her heart. The fakir further suggested, "If you wish, you can move Shanu to my palace, and I will return to my village. Once your son grows up, I will come back." Hearing this, the king agreed and shifted Shanu to the palace. Shanu began to enjoy the days of her freedom, indulging in the luxurious lifestyle of the palace she had always dreamed of. This was the life she had envisioned when she asked her father to cast a spell that would compel the king to marry her. Everything was going according to their plan, but Shanu often regretted that if she had given birth to a son, she could have stayed with the king forever. When her daughter was born, however, the king, misled by the astrologer, announced throughout the village that Allah had blessed him with a son. That same day, the fakir came to visit the king, who showered him with lavish rewards. The fakir's fortunes took a turn for the better. The fakir then visited his daughter Shanu and warned her, "Be careful. Make sure no one lays eyes on this girl or everyone will know that you have given birth to a daughter." Shanu became cautious. She and her father had arranged for a midwife from another village, who had no idea that she was delivering the child of the king's wife. Everything was unfolding exactly as the father and daughter had planned. As time passed, the king longed to see his child, not knowing it was a girl. Meanwhile, the girl grew up, raised in an environment of hatred from her mother. She always felt the weight of her mother's disdain. One day, she asked her mother, "Why am I kept locked within the 4 walls of this palace? I want to see the world outside." Her mother, filled with bitterness, responded, "It is your fault. If you were a son instead of a daughter, you would have been ruling this kingdom today. But you came into this world with cursed fate, and this is your punishment." The girl would cry and repeatedly ask, "Where is my father?" But her mother couldn't even bear to look at her. Then, one day, The girl managed to escape the palace. Shanu was terrified when she discovered her daughter had run away. She rushed to her father, the astrologer, and said, "My daughter has escaped the palace. She has rebelled. What will happen if she reveals the truth to everyone, that she is my daughter? The king will also find out that he doesn't have a son, but a daughter." The astrologer was equally alarmed but reassured Shanu, "Don't worry, I will devise a new plan." The astrologer returned to the king and said, "O king, I have calculated the stars. Your son is about to come of age. He is turning 18. I suggest you arrange his marriage now. According to my calculations, if you delay the wedding and anyone ordinary lays eyes on him during the ceremony, he will transform into an animal." Hearing this, the king was furious and shouted, "You fakir, I have followed all your advice so far. But how can I believe this? I haven't even seen my son yet. You always deceive me with your words. I have had enough. My patience has run out. I cannot live without seeing my heir. I am going to that palace right now to see my son." The astrologer immediately stopped the king, saying, "O king, if you make this mistake, you will lose your son forever." The king calmed down and decided to follow the fakir's advice. He then began searching for a bride for his son. Suddenly, one of his ministers suggested, "O king, I advise you to choose a Hafiz-e-Quran girl for your son. She will guide him on the righteous path and always pray for his well-being. This would ensure a long and prosperous life for your son, protecting him from the evil eye." The king liked the minister's suggestion and expressed his gratitude, instructing the minister to find a girl who was a Hafiz-e-Quran and also in need of support. Following the king's orders, the minister began his search and eventually came across a beautiful girl in another village. She was a Hafiz-e-Quran and lived with an elderly woman. The minister informed the king, who immediately decided to visit the elderly woman the next day to propose the marriage. The woman was taken aback and said, "This daughter is my only support, a blessing from Allah after many prayers. But if this is Allah's will, I accept the proposal." The girl, whose name was Nur Bano, cried inconsolably. The king assured the elderly woman, "We do not need any dowry. We wish to hold the wedding in just 1 week and will come with a grand procession to celebrate." The king informed his wife, Shanu, about the decision, saying, "We have chosen Nur Bano, a pious girl, as the wife for our son, and the wedding will take place in a week." Shanu was filled with dread upon hearing this news. She immediately informed her father, the astrologer, and said, "Do something, or my life will be ruined." The astrologer replied, "Don't worry, let the wedding day come, and I will handle everything." Finally, the wedding day arrived. Shanu was in a state of despair, blaming her father. "Oh, father, it's because of you that I am in this situation. Today, I will be exposed, and all my schemes will be ruined. The king will punish you, and we will both be humiliated in front of the entire village." The astrologer laughed and calmed his daughter, saying, "Just wait and watch what I do." A little while later, the astrologer brought a cow to the palace. Shanu, shocked to see the cow, asked, "Father, what is this for?" He replied, "This is your son." Shanu's face turned pale. She thought her father had lost his mind. The astrologer reassured her, "Don't worry, I'm going to see the king now. The time has come to play my final move." Disguised as a fakir, the astrologer approached the king, weeping profusely. He said, "O king, I warned you never to make this mistake, to never see your son. But being a father, you couldn't resist, and in fulfilling your desire, you have ruined your son's life." The king, startled, said, "What are you talking about? I haven't done anything of the sort. Speak clearly. What are you trying to say?" The king was filled with anxiety. The fakir, crying bitterly, said, "O king, when I went to visit your wife at the palace, she told me your son was missing. However, I found a cow in the palace courtyard making strange noises. I immediately realized that someone must have seen your son. I suspect that you, unable to resist, laid eyes on him. I had warned you that no human, apart from his mother, should ever see him. Now, it seems your son has turned into an animal because someone saw him." The king, hearing this, cried out, "How is this possible? Are you trying to deceive me? I have trusted you and given you immense wealth, but now you bring me such terrible news." The king's anger was uncontrollable, and he felt like punishing the fakir. The fakir pleaded, "Forgive me, O king. I warned you before that if anyone other than his mother saw your son, he would lose his form, and now the fear has come true." The king calmed himself and asked the fakir, "Tell me, is there any way to bring my son back to his human form?" The fakir said, "Yes, O king. There is one condition. A Hafiz-e-Quran girl must marry this cow. However, the girl must never know that she is marrying a cow. For 2 years, this truth must remain hidden. After 2 years, your son will regain his human form." Upon hearing this, the king immediately ordered, "Very well, arrange the wedding procession. I will handle everything else." The king prepared for the wedding, and a grand procession set off for the girl's home to celebrate the occasion. Meanwhile, everyone at the wedding kept asking, "Where is the groom? How can there be a wedding procession without the groom?" When Nur Bano heard that the groom had not arrived, she became extremely anxious. Her elderly mother deeply regretted her decision, wondering whom she had married off her innocent daughter to. However, when everyone explained that the groom was severely ill and could not make the long journey, they accepted this reasoning, and Nur Bano's marriage was solemnized. No one knew that she had been married to a cow. The fakir and Shanu were present at the wedding, feeling overjoyed because their days of luxury were not over yet. They had bought themselves 2 more years of indulgence. Shanu, being the king's wife, could continue living her extravagant life. Shanu had not yet seen her daughter-in-law because her face was covered with a veil. Shanu had no interest in seeing this insignificant girl, and even the fakir hadn't seen Nur Bano because she had remained in the women's quarters. Nur Bano was now brought to the king's palace. When the king saw his daughter-in-law, he was pleased. He explained to her, "My son is very ill. He has a condition that could make you sick if you stay near him. That's why I have decided that you must remain separated from him." Hearing this, Nur Bano nodded in agreement, having no objections. At the same time, the king prohibited Shanu from entering the palace, saying, "Until my son reverts from a cow back to his human form, Shanu must stay with him." For this reason, Shanu had yet to see Nur Bano. One day, Nur Bano unexpectedly saw the fakir and was shocked to realize he was her grandfather. Overwhelmed, she rushed to hug him, crying, "You never even tried to find me." The king, witnessing this scene, was astonished and demanded angrily, "How do you know this girl?" The fakir grew nervous, but Nur Bano immediately spoke. "O king, he is not a fakir. He is my grandfather. I used to see him visit my mother regularly. My mother never allowed me to leave the house, but one day I managed to escape." The king was stunned upon hearing this and turned pale. He placed his sword on the fakir's shoulder and commanded, "Tell me the truth. What are you hiding from me?" The fakir, panicking, denied the allegations, saying, "No, this girl is lying. I have no connection to her." Nur Bano, bursting into tears, revealed the entire truth to the king. She explained how her mother had kept her imprisoned for years, never letting her step outside. Whenever she asked about her father, Her mother would get angry and say, "You have no father." Her mother would taunt her, saying, "If you were a boy, you would have ruled, and so would I. But you came into this world with ill fate, ruining my life." This was why Nur Bano had run away one day, eventually ending up in another village. A kind woman took her in and encouraged her to memorize the Quran. Nur Bano dedicated herself to this and regularly recited it. She had only one prayer, to one day meet her father, as her mother had rejected her and denied her the love of a parent. The king's eyes filled with tears as he listened to Nur Bano's story. He said, "Nur Bano, I will bring a woman before you. Tell me if you recognize her." Shortly after, the king summoned Shanu to the palace. When Shanu saw Nur Bano, she froze. The king asked Nur Bano, "Tell me, who is this woman?" Nur Bano immediately replied, "O king, this is my mother. She tormented me, kept me locked within 4 walls for years, and never allowed me to step outside. She is the wretched woman who cursed me and kept me from knowing my father. To this day she hasn't told me anything about him." The king, enraged, glared at Shanu and the fakir. Then he embraced Nur Bano and said, "Nur Bano, your wish will be fulfilled. I will reunite you with your father." Nur Bano exclaimed, "O king, please tell me, where is my father?" The king responded, "Your father is standing before you." Nur Bano was stunned, her eyes widening in disbelief. The king then revealed the entire truth, saying, "I married Shanu in the hope of having a child, but I didn't know that Shanu married me as part of a deceitful scheme. Shanu was pregnant with a daughter but lied to me, claiming that I was going to have a son. I was deceived because I trusted the fakir, who was none other than your astrologer grandfather in disguise. He convinced me that I had a son and warned me that my son was ill. He said I must not look at him or allow anyone else to see him, as it would cause him to transform into an animal. Terrified, I obeyed and never saw my son, believing Allah had blessed me with a boy. I even built a palace for the fakir and sent my son there to keep him hidden. Little did I know it was all a lie. Later, the fakir told me that my son was ready for marriage and that after the wedding, I would be allowed to see him. Trusting him, I began searching for a bride. My minister chose you, and I arranged the marriage. Afterward, the fakir informed me that my son had taken the form of a cow, claiming that only after 2 years would he revert to his human form. I never imagined that all of this was a fraud. Now I know the truth, that I never had a son. It was you, my daughter, who was kept away from me all these years." Hearing this, Nur Bano was speechless, unable to comprehend what she had just learned. The king immediately divorced Shanu and punished her and her father severely. Nur Bano finally reunited with her father, the king, and began living a happy life with him. Nur Bano had always prayed to Allah to fulfill her one wish, to meet her father and experience a father's love. Her prayers were answered, and she became a virtuous girl whose goodness led her to her father. So, friends, this was today's story. I hope you enjoyed it.